Yay. Hello. I'm a couple seconds early, I think. No, it's just 5 o'clock now. I'm Dr. Rosie Kuhn, and I'm going to look up here, I think. And this is Spiritual Dilemmas, is the theme of this particular playlist. And tonight on this live, we're going to be speaking about, you and I, hopefully, I'll be having a conversation about leaps of faith and how they resolve spiritual dilemmas. So let me share a little bit about me. I shared a little bit at the last live I did. I grew up in a Catholic family, 9 kids. We lived outside Detroit, and I didn't know much about life except what I was taught as in Catholic school and by my parents and how that went. And I thought that was how life was going to be. I'd get married, have kids, live that kind of life. And there were points along the way where I had to take leaps of faith because initially um, with the growing up Catholic, there were so many elements of the Catholic Church that didn't work for me, and I didn't know what to do because if you don't believe in God, you're going to go to hell. So, like, if I don't believe in what's going on in the Catholic Church, I'm going to go to hell, and so that created a dilemma, right? And hi, Alicia. Thanks for being here. And so that was a dilemma. Do I believe in going to hell enough that I don't leave the church, or do I leave the church and the possibility of going to hell? So that was like one of the first big dilemmas that showed up for me. And it's not just in terms of being a spiritual dilemma. Do I believe in God or not? Do I believe in a church or religion or not? But it's a human dilemma. And what that did in terms of the challenges and conflict that it created with between me and my mom, especially. My dad was what he did, but my mom was much more upset. So it became a bigger dilemma to tell my mom, "Hey, I'm not going to go to church anymore. It doesn't work for me." So that was a horrible, terrible moment. But I had to have enough faith in my experience and my truth in terms of Catholic Church was not didn't it didn't support me and didn't make me feel enlightened. It didn't make me feel joyous. And so I wanted to find and explore other things. So that's one of those elements that shaped my life. That leap of faith to say, okay, I trust enough in myself that I am going to tell my mom I'm not going to go to church anymore, and then to be in a state of exploration for a while, not knowing where that would lead me. So that was the first of many leaps of faith. When I decided to marry the man that I married, and I was only 20 years old, but I thought that was what you're supposed to do. That was a leap of faith. And it was one that created a lot of growth opportunities. And that's for me what everything is about, is creating growth opportunities. That leap of faith to marry that person, like I said, created a lot of growth opportunities, a lot of challenges, a lot of ways of looking at life that it wasn't working for me. So that was another leap. The next leap was when I decided to divorce him and move on to what was next. So on and on, there are these leaps of faith, and each one creates some dilemmas, and at the same time resolves others, which is interesting, isn't it? That we um, we have these dilemmas, we have these frustrations, we have these questions, we have this sense of things aren't the way that I thought they would be, and how do I be with that? And we can look at books, we can look at videos, we can listen to other people, we can ask experts, but it comes down to how are we going to see it for ourselves? I'm going to go let Gracie out. So, we're talking about dilemmas, spiritual dilemmas, and we're talking about human dilemmas in a sense. The human dilemma is I wanted to get married. Here was this man that loved me. I loved him. We had we got married, but then it's like, wait, we're not getting along. We're not communicating. We're not having an intimacy that felt fulfilling for either of us. That becomes a dilemma. Like, how do you do? What do you do about that? How do you be with that? How do you grow a relationship? How do you, all of those questions, right? And so each one of those questions brings about an opportunity to do something different that might create a better outcome. So for me, um, I continued to look at myself. To the degree that I was in my early 20s, and continually to look at how can I improve myself? How can I shift so that I'm a better partner for my husband? And at the same time, I constantly was looking at him and how he could uh, change and make this partnership better. So where in there is a leap of faith? The leap of faith is where I myself can begin to look deeper and deeper into how I can make changes that will grow me. And each time that we take that leap of faith that grows us, it takes us to another level, an up leveling, as I've talked about in previous sessions, about up leveling to the next level of human challenges, human experiences that we have to face. So, that took me over and over and over again towards my career as a marriage and family therapist. I worked in recovery. I when I went for my PhD in transpersonal psychology, I specialized in spiritual guidance because when I was a therapist, I found something was missing, and that which was missing was this element of spirituality, a relationship with our spirit self. And even that going towards something so out of the box created this leap of faith. Like, this is what feels right to me. But in terms of consensus view of reality, it's so outside the box, but it was what felt right to me. And so I followed that. And then when I heard about coaching, life coaching, I saw how, for me, it was an integration and a platform for transformation from our consensus view of reality to really consensus view of reality to really that which we say we want for each one of us to be in our fullest potentiality, to live in our fullest potentiality. And even that, you can see my hands are doing sort of this leap of faithness, because to even shift from a paradigm that's fear based, most of our reality continues to reinforce that it's important to be afraid, whether it's, every single advertisement anywhere you look is saying you are missing this, or you lack that, or you should be afraid if you don't have this or know this. So it's all fear based. And to shift up your paradigm, to shift our paradigm from fear based to something else, then that's a huge leap of faith. That's what miracles are about. That's what I call myself a fairy godmother, and it really creates that sense of potentiality and that leap faithing, that faith leaping that is so possible for us. So, that's the important piece here, is that the leaps of faith that we take is not only in terms of our spiritual life, our spirituality. We don't. It's that, but it's so much more that everyday element of life where we are having to see who we are and make choices for ourselves. Really listen to ourselves and see what's true for ourselves, and then make leaps of faith. These tiny little incremental leaps of faith that make a difference in our life. A number of years ago, I was in Mountain View, California, at the East West Bookstore doing a book talk, and I was talking about leaps of faith and the quantum leaps. And I was so privileged to have some fellow in the audience who happened to work for one of the, probably Google or something like that, but this physicist, smart guy, and he said, "Do you know that what a quantum is?" And we think quantum is quantum. He said a quantum is the distance between 2 points. So if I put my fingers together and do that, there's looks like there's no distance between that. That's a quantum. And so when we talk about quantum leaps, that's what we're talking about, is little tiny incremental choice making elements that make a difference over time, and it is transformative. I know that personally, and I know that in terms of all the work that I do with my clients. So how do we get there? How do we look at this? And what's the importance of developing faith, leap faithing? I keep doing that. Faith leaping muscles. We need faith leaping muscles in order to make those leaps of faith. Hang on one second. Gracie's coming back in. So I should say at this point, or I want to say at this point, I have 60 minutes. YouTube gives me 60 minutes for these YouTube lives right now. And so I want to make sure that you get what you need. And if you have questions and thoughts, please let me know. I'm glad you're here. Um, and if this information is valuable to you, please like and subscribe it, and please leave comments below of what's been valuable or what is valuable. What am I saying here that is making sense or is maybe not making sense to you, and you'd like to have some clarification on that? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So, faith leaping muscles, strength, courage, and the ability to just stretch our capacity to think differently and maybe include more of what we may know is out there. We might talk about it, but to actually experience it and actively engage in those elements is really, really important. And that's how we grow ourselves. But what's really important, and I find this with every client, and you'll probably hear me say this over and over and over in every one of these lives, is that there are four things that are really important when I'm doing coaching with my clients and when I'm training individuals to be coaches. These are the four questions that I really focus on. And the first question is, what do you want? What do you want enough that you're willing to do things differently? In a sense, what is important enough to you? Period. What is important enough to you? So a person might say, so for instance, me when I was 16 and said, look at this church thing isn't working for me. If I had a coach at that time, and she might say, well, what is it you want? And it's like, I want a sense of connection with God. I want a sense of connection with the truth and with love. And I'm not experiencing this here. So in being able to say, I want truth and I want connection and I want love and I want this engaged relationship, am able to articulate what's really important to me. And enough that it's important enough that I'm willing to make some changes and shifts. One of the books I wrote, this is the first book I wrote actually, called Self-Empowerment 101. And in this book, I talk a lot about wanting it enough, wanting whatever it is that you want enough that you're willing to do something different. And every time that we're willing to do something different, that's that place of potential leap of faith. So, what do you want? That's the first question I ask every client, and that's the first question I want every one of my trainees to ask their clients. What do you want? And what does that look like? What does that feel like? How do you know when you have that? So again, in this talking to this 16-year-old and saying, how do you know when you have that which you want? I can say, because I feel a joyousness, because I feel a peacefulness, because I feel myself. I love myself when I'm in this state. Those are elements of what I want that's really important for me to articulate. And this is important for every single person, I believe, to articulate. It's a way of empowering ourselves to know ourselves. And, a lot of religions and spiritual traditions will say, well, wanting is actually not a good thing. Wanting and desires are not a good thing. But even to not want a desire is a want and a desire. We have to look at this. And we're always acting on wants and desires, just like we're always taking leaps of faith. We're always acting on wants and desires, always. The more conscious we become about it, the more conscious we become in articulating what we want, the more clear our trajectory, more clear we can make our path. And the more pragmatic, then I find spirituality to be highly pragmatic because it keeps me on my trajectory, on my life purpose and my life path. So the more that we know what we want and are clear about that, then the more we're able to make that happen. And the more we let go of the things that aren't working for us, the things that make us feel like we're suffering or in pain or stuck or stifled. Most of us are, if I ask people, if I ask 10 people, do you want to be stuck, stifled, and constrained? 10 people will say, no, I don't want that. It's like, well, what do you want? Right? What do you want? And do you want it enough? And so that's that first question. Second question, what's the obstacle in the way of having what you want? Now, when I was that 16-year-old child, before I had that conversation with my mom, if you said, what's in the way of you having that relationship with your spirit self and particularly potentially a spiritual tradition or whatever, what's in the way? I'd say my mother's in the way because I have to tell her and she's going to be mad. That was the biggest obstacle for me. The second biggest obstacle was I'm afraid I'm going to go to hell. I'm afraid, I'm afraid this is what I've been trained. This is in my cellular memory that God will hate me if I leave, I'll go to hell. And at the same time, I knew of the God that was loving, all loving. So all of this sort of dilemma, like this is what I'm afraid of, but this is what I believe, this is what's true, but this is what's going to happen. So for me, the answers to the second question, what's in the way or what's the obstacles in the way, is my mother and I'm going to go to hell. The fear I'm going to go to hell. So a fear, two fears. I was afraid my mother was going to be really angry, which she was, and I was afraid I was going to go to hell, which I don't believe I'm going to go to hell now. So that one's cleared up. But so, number three, the question number three is what needs to shift so that obstacle two disappears? Well, in terms of hell, I was able to be okay with that in my thinking because I didn't necessarily believe in right and wrong and going to hell, but there was still a little bit of questions about that. But what needed to shift in terms of my fears about my mom, I had to shift that my relationship with my spiritual self had to come first over my relationship with her. That's a big dilemma, isn't it? That's a big dilemma that we where do we put ourselves first over parents or over our children or over our careers or over money? How do we do that? That's a big deal. And so in this moment, I'm talking about a big deal for this 16-year-old girl. But every single one of us face this when we're facing that truth, like this, what's working for me and how I see the world, it's different than my parents. I'm talking as if I'm you, or it's different than my bosses, or it's different than the financial perspective and context in the world. And so, how do we rectify that? How do we justify? How do we be with ourselves when we go, this has to be more important, than my relationship with my mother. I was watching the other night. This was last week. I was watching something called I forget the name of it, but it had to do with um, being at Pixar. It was a documentary about people at Pixar, and they were profiling a lot of different people who work there and their jobs and how they contribute to this community and this culture. And this one fellow said it took him until he was 28 to come out as a gay man, come out of the closet. And he talked about being closeted, and being closeted to him meant that he wasn't, or people aren't allowed to be their fullest expression. So anytime we're closeted, we're not allowed to be our fullest expression. So for me, in a sense, coming out to my mom that I didn't want to participate in Catholicism was my way of coming out of the closet. as a as a non-Catholic. And so each one of us in the ways that we do to individuate and to become more ourselves, we have to come out of the closets. We have to come out of our own individual unique closet. And so in that moment, in terms of question number 3, what needs to shift so that I can have my fulfillment and to let go or to move through number 2 is I needed to shift my relationship with myself so I could honestly articulate to my mom what was true for me. That's a big deal. And that's basically what I do with all my clients is we look at what is it that you're afraid of? What's in the way? What's that obstacle? And how do you become you so that you can meet that obstacle and in a sense leap over it or leap through it or take the path that eliminates it, obliterates it, annihilates it, shatters that so that you are utilizing yourself and freer to express yourself in all ways. That's what I want to do. That's what I do with my clients. That's what I want to bring to you through some of these lives and the Tuesday videos I do is I want to bring that potentiality to you because you came here as a divine being to fulfill yourself fully and to have some information and see other people's experiences. Perhaps that could be useful to you. So that's why I'm doing this. So question number 1, what do you want? Question 2, what's in the way of having what you want? Question number 3 is what needs to shift? Now, in this case, I'm talking about a spiritual dilemma with my mom and the Catholic Church and all of that. But this can be, what do you want? I want a career that's fulfilling. I want a family. I want a better income. Whatever that is, it's still what you want, which is really important. And it's the fulfillment of that that brings about many, many, many leaps of faith if you're willing to do that. So then the fourth question is, what will you practice? What will you practice to make the shifts so that so those obstacles will disappear, disintegrate, and you have more access to what you want and you can create that? What is it that you're willing to practice? So all of this conversation can be pretty easy up to the point where we begin to practice taking those incremental little leaps of faith. Now, what most of us need to practice is first of all noticing. Now, creating a practice of noticing is the first shift that we make. And if you think about it, that too is a leap of faith. We begin to utilize our wisdom to say, okay, so what am I noticing? What am I seeing? And we become conscious of our experience in the world. So much of what we do and how we be in the world is so unconscious. And so when it's unconscious, we don't know that we're doing it, and then we can't change it. I'm just reading your response, Alicia. She says, very true. How do we separate our spiritual beings from other things that seem to take over on a day-to-day basis? That's a great question. So I'm going to ask it again. I'm going to read it again. How do we separate our spiritual being from other things that seem to take over on a day-to-day basis? This has to do, again, number 1, Alicia, with, first of all, what do you want? And I'll say what you want based on your question is you want to be more integrated with your spiritual being on a day-to-day basis. You want to be more connected, more engaged, live through this spiritual perspective, the spiritual alignment, we'll say. And what that means is, in a sense, that there's spiritual principles. There's principles that open your heart. There's principles that make you feel aligned with your wholeness and with the world. And the more that we become aware of that, the more that we can see, oh, I'm not doing it. I forgot. A lot of what people will say is, oh, I forgot. I forgot to practice that. I forgot to look. I forgot to read. I forgot to write. I forgot. I forgot. They got caught back into their life. And so this is a challenge for every single one of us. And you've seen that I talk about enlightened living and cultivating enlightened living. And how do we do that on a day-to-day basis? Number one is cultivate the practice of noticing. Number one, what do you want? And have a sense of what that is when you are in that state of being spiritual. When I'm in that quality of spiritualness, I can feel lately, the last today, I've been feeling this experience of joyousness. It's just the word joyousness. It's like, wow, that's pretty huge. How do I? And it's like the dilemma shows up. Can I actually feel joyousness all the time? Am I supposed to do that? Is there something wrong with me? Am I kind of going mental or something that I'm joyous right now for no reason? And we have these questions, and that's part of this human spiritual dilemma is we question when we're feeling great and we're aligned with ourselves. So knowing what that's like to be aligned with ourselves then helps us know when we're not aligned. So for instance, sometimes in terms of how I'm supposed to be a businesswoman, how I'm supposed to be doing what I'm supposed to be doing, that isn't in alignment with how I see myself and want to be in my life. So I have to go, okay, this is what's true for me. And when I'm in my highest truth and my highest good, I know I'm in the highest truth and highest good for everyone. And so I practice that. When I know that I'm in a state of fear and anxiety, I know I'm not in my spiritual self. And I know I've gotten pulled out by something most likely external, but something in my head at the same time, in a sense that my thoughts are saying there's something going on in my thoughts that have me um, be anxious and afraid, but it's something usually outside myself that triggered that thought. So I go, oh, I'm afraid and I'm anxious. Okay, I got to stop. But if I don't notice that, then I'm not aware of that, and then I can't make a choice about that. So, Alicia, this is a great question, and it's kind of at the bottom, the core question of everything, because if we're so used to being in a state of stress and anxiousness and uh, vigilance and caution and wariness. Very rarely are we actually in that state of peace and joyousness and love and playfulness. Even playfulness is such a huge indicator when we're not in that other stuff. And part of my life, when I was thinking about what are the three words that are the foundations for my career, it was freedom, fun, and flexibility. So if I'm not feeling freedom, fun, and flexibility, I'm not aligned with my principles. So noticing is the key, and cultivating the practice of noticing is a big practice because we have to be conscious. How do you develop that capacity to notice? How do you develop in the word mindfulness? How do you cultivate and develop that? And it takes practice. It takes consciousness. It takes you might a lot of people. There's all different ways of doing that. For instance, setting alarm or setting a timer so every 5 minutes you go, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's it like being me right now? What's the experience of being me? And then you can check in and go, oh, I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling a little nervous. I'm feeling hungry. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling excited. I'm about to go into a meeting and I'm really excited about that. Um, so you can check in with yourself and say, what is it like to be me right now? And it's not about the doing, because the doing is so automatic in our life. What we're so unconscious of is how we're being. And what's it like? What's the experience that we're having in this moment being me? What's this experience of being you in this moment? So finding ways, developing ways to cultivate that capacity for noticing is the number one um, tool for cultivating potentiality in oneself. Because then we can see, oh, I'm feeling constrained and constricted, or I'm feeling expansive and expressive. So those are elements that are part of our life all the time. We're always feeling that, and you know, at night, 6 o'clock comes. I have dinner, and I kind of plug myself into most likely a good series on Netflix or something like that, because I need a downtime. I need to get out of this practice of stuff that's in my mind all the time. But the more that I become more aligned with myself and enjoy myself and not be in that state of angst and worry and cluttered stuff of coming from wherever, then I'm able to be more playful in the evenings and not necessarily have to avoid and ignore and distract myself from life. So when we use alcohol, when we use food, when we use sex, when we use retail shopping, debting, gambling, when we use those things to distract ourselves and avoid life to the degree that it becomes an abusiveness, then we have to look at that. I mean, I can enjoy binging on Netflix. I don't do it all day. I don't do it all every night, but when I do it, I enjoy it. The same with a glass of wine or coffee or whatever it is that people use. But when it becomes the go-to drug or the go-to activity to dissipate that angst and that frustration, and life is not working for me, then we need to do something about that. And that again becomes a leap of faith. So many of us, in fact, in the work that I do, I worked in recovery for 8 years in Nova Scotia. I was a clinical therapist there and worked with people in recovery. And that's where I learned the most, I think, even though I had all this training, all of this training I've had, all the academics, working with this particular population of human beings, w was the greatest gift of my life in terms of my learning and growing, as a human being, but also as a clinician and as a life coach, as a human being. And one of the things I realized was that even though it looks like there's substance abuses, drugs, alcohol, food, whatever that is, retail shopping, that underneath that is another addiction. And it's usually an addiction to anxiety or upsetness. There's other sources of upset that is not getting addressed. And to address that, it takes a leap of faith for alcoholics or drug addicts, for anyone who is saying, "Hey, my life is unmanageable and I need help." That's a leap of faith to admit I'm powerless over this addiction. For me, it was worry. I was addicted to worry. I was addicted to a number of things, but one thing was worry. How do you let go of worry, right? But I was addicted to it. So we have all of these addictive patterns in our being, and 99% of them are self-defeating addictions. Worrying, if I'm addicted to love, if I'm addicted to expression and beauty and good things like that, rarely is that abusive and self-defeating. So we're looking at those elements of life that are self-defeating versus self-fulfilling. So most of the fellowships in the world and spiritual traditions, they're here to empower us into being self-fulfilled. My vision statement is the fulfillment of the human spirit, the fulfillment of the human spirit through the empowerment of every individual. Now I say that because it's a vision of how I see the world at some point, that every one of us has a sense of fulfillment of our human spirit. There's the fulfillment of our spirit, and is that it's connected to our human because we're in a sense one and the same. We have this physical human experience and we have a spiritual experience at the same time, and this is that integration process that we're doing. But every time that we meet our self-defeatingness, we have an opportunity to say, I can do it different. Much like, again, coming back to your question, um, Alicia, about how do we separate our spiritual being from other things in the world? What do we do about that? It's more of the integration. I want to see the integration of spirit in everyday things, so that when you're working with your clients, that your presence is totally and completely present, and that you're not distracted by, should I be doing this or should I be doing that? Am I looking good? Am I Is she going to be okay with how I am? That you're totally, completely aligned with yourself and in love with who you are and the work that you're doing in the world. This is another piece that's really challenging. The statistic is that 80% of the population of the world hate their jobs. So 80% of the people in the world are unhappy in their work. So what does that do to them in terms of their human emotions, their stress level, how they perceive themselves, what they're doing in the world, how they're being a father or a parent, how they're being a partner or a friend, how they're being of service in the world? How do we be when we're so unhappy in our work? That's a really hard thing. So, number one is being clear of, do I love my work? Do I like my work? a lot of times, a lot of times we do what we're good at versus what's ours to do. And this is a big challenge for people. This is a challenge for me. I'm really good at writing. I don't know how, but I'm really good at writing and I'm really good at doing this. I'm really good at teaching, really good at facilitating. I'm really good at interviews, really good at this kind of process. At the same time, I think I shouldn't be good at this. Not that I shouldn't be good at it, but I shouldn't do it because the kind of person that would do this is a smarty pants or somebody who's bigger than, or they think that they're holier than thou. And so that kind of challenged me for a long time that if I'm want to do this on YouTube and do these live or even write books, it's like I'm thinking my ego is a big deal. And that's been a challenge. It's a dilemma. But if I don't do what I love, then I'm diminishing and self-defeating. I'm self-defeating myself if I go, "Oh, I better do something less than so that I won't be thought of that." That's self-defeating, and in that is oppression, and then it becomes self-oppression because I'm not even allowing myself to consider the possibility of doing what I love. Now, if Elton John or Cher or that kind of all dates me, but people who are entertainers and have this, amazing ability to be on stage, if they didn't do that, we would be at so much loss in terms of what the world, all the gifts that the world has been given through all these entertainers or motivational people, orchestras, any kind of artist. We would be lost without all of those people not shining. But each one of those people, I believe, have to deal with that leap of faith. When does it feel okay? When is it exciting? When is it good? I'm using those words, but each person has their own dilemma. And we know that a lot of entertainers um, and artists and people in public, they have uh, quite often they have some sort of addiction problem, and it's because they have to deal with themselves as a human being and their spirit being and be this in the world. That's a huge dilemma. And so whether it's working um, in marketing or working in a car manufacturing place or working as an insurance salesperson, each of us have the capacity to enjoy what we're doing and enjoy being. There's I think it's a Zen saying, chop wood, carry water. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So that everyday elements are full of the essence of life and beauty. And that's really cool. That's what I'm striving for, is to wake up in the morning and go, oh my gosh, my whatever it is I'm doing, it's what I've been doing for decades. And yet it's becoming more and more enriching and fulfilling as opposed to, oh my God, I do the same thing every day. When is it? It's just like it's enough and bored. But instead, I keep growing it. And that's because I keep letting go of the self defeating um, thoughts, the self defeating beliefs, the self defeating interpretations. And every time I let go of those self-defeating thoughts, beliefs, interpretations, there's a leap of faith. Is that really true? Can I do that? Can I actually be me and and enjoy me? Is that okay? Is anybody gonna love me if I'm me, you know? It's and and the most important thing is, do I love me as me? And I haven't loved me as me because I've never let myself. I I I didn't trust myself. I didn't respect myself because I was taught that I was not respectable. And so to shift that is again another leap of faith to go, wait, I am a pretty cool human being. I'm a pretty effective human being. I am doing some pretty cool things with myself, for myself, in the world. I have a great relationship with my daughter. I have great friends. I've been doing some really wonderful things that I love to do. And I can say I've written books and I've done these things. And whether people buy them or not, it doesn't matter. What matters is these are contributions that I've made in the expression of me in the world. Now that's pretty challenging, and to get to a greater and greater capacity to respect myself, because I should have been respecting myself all along. I had just grew up in a family and a situation that didn't support that, and I know that I'm not alone in that. It's like, "Wait, I have never been taught to respect myself and to appreciate myself and to think for myself." To go, Catholic Church doesn't work for me. And I'd like to know what does work for me, and to have a parent that says, "Wow, I totally support you in being curious. That's awesome. I'm glad you know that. Thank you for sharing that with me." That would have been a great, great experience. Well, that would have been life-changing. That's not the experience I had when I told my mom that I was not going to go back to church. She didn't talk to me for 3 weeks in the same house for 3 weeks, and it was never, ever the same. So fascinating, but very how I took that and what I did with that was then my choice, and I had to be with that. But it grew me completely, grew me to go, okay, I have to own what's true for me. I came out of the closet, and that was a moment of self-respect, and it took me to the next level of what do I do with that? How do I grow myself? How do I know what's mine? How do I know what I really want? Where to find that? Where's it going to come from? All those great questions. So, the point of all of this is we are coming to closer and closer. What I want for you is to come closer and closer to asking yourself again those questions. What is it I want? Alicia, in looking at your question again, it's like, how do you want your spirituality to be part of of your everyday life? How do you want that enlightened living to be you? And how do you want to express that in your being? Now, some people might want that in terms of having more sacred doodads in their house, or wearing beads, or meditating before every client. Everyone will have their own way of doing that. It's a way, a lot of the beads and the sacred statues and doodads and things really have to do with a way of being mindful. Ah, this is true. Ah, this is true. Um, and so when we can have those things that will remind us of our truth, the truth of our being as a spiritual being in this human experience, then we can stay mindful and not forget that, oh, yeah, I'm trying to be more in alignment with my spiritual self. So that's been a really, really big thing too, is to look at how can you include that, include elements of what does remind you and brings you back to who you are as a spiritual being, if that's what you want. Because you're always a spiritual being. You're always here in alignment with yourself and that part that can pull you out by having demands that are outside of yourself, and that's a dilemma in itself, isn't it? So how we can have how do we create those leaps of faith? And those leaps of faith will build to greater and greater degrees and capacities to be courageous and give us strength and resilience. The resilience is the stretching and the strengthening of those capacities. Any other questions or feedback? Hello, creativity for consciousness. Nice to see you. So I've just got a few more minutes before we wrap up. I'm going to look at my notes and see what I've got here for you. One of the things that I wanted to touch on too is quite often we all again we all have levels of faith. Um, we all have our levels of faith in something, and it may not be spirituality. For instance, we all put our money in the bank, and we have faith that the money will be there when we want it. Quite often, people use the stock market. They have faith in the stock market. It goes up and down and up and down, and they have faith, and they leave their money there, and that. People have faith in getting in their car, and their car's going to run. They have faith that they go on the highway and they'll be safe. They have faith that their children will go to school and come home. We have faith. We live in faith right now in terms of this pandemic that we're living in, and we have faith that we'll get through this. Sometimes we lose our faith. Sometimes we don't know what to do. Sometimes we feel like we're just um, snowballing into a state of I'll say the word cataclysm comes up. And that's what happens too, is quite often for so many of us at some point in our life, we lose faith. Um, yes, Margaret, I know that's you, and I'm so happy to see you. Um, we lose faith, and when we lose faith, it's not a right, wrong, good or bad, but sometimes the situations and the circumstances are such that it's like there's no sense of faith. There's no sense of reality beyond this moment that feels cataclysmic. It feels a shattering. And quite often in the spiritual traditions, there's words like the dark night of the soul, or this place of abysmness that you don't know what to do and you don't know where to go. And there isn't even the possibility of faith. It's just an isness. My sister lost her husband to suicide many years ago. It was cataclysmic for her. There was no sense of reality of, oh yeah, I'll just take a leap of faith. No sense of that. Being in the moment, being in the crisis, and so many of us have faced that sense of no faith, no sense of self, no sense of reality, and being in the abysmalness of that is horrendous. And that's part of so many of our human experiences, just part of the humanness of it, and part of the spirit human the dilemma that we're in. And quite often we can feel like if we take a leap of faith, that we've somehow failed. Like we've taken a leap of faith and it hasn't turned out well. And there's a possibility for failure. And the way that David Hawkins puts it, it's like an opportunity. These leaps of faith create opportunities for humility, which is this human spirit uh, place that is so exquisite, but so challenging at the same time. We know the humility, we know humbleness. Each one of us at some point, somehow. Hi, Alyssa. Nice to see you. We've been in these places that are so feel maybe fractured. These are words that are just popping up. Fractured and humiliating. Humiliating is more on the ego side, and humbling is this place of so human, so human. And we're so afraid to allow and accept our humanness, which is fascinating. It's again one of those dilemmas that we live with as a human spirit is we have so much humiliation for our humanness and our humanity. Um, we can have a lot of compassion sometimes for other people's humanness and their failures and foibles. But when it comes to us, it's like, oh my God, it can be crumbling. to feel the humility of just being. So last week, I have to share this with you in alignment with this conversation is, here I'm wanting to do these YouTube live videos, and I'm all set up. I worked really hard. I planned. I did it all. I was ready. 5 o'clock came, and the video didn't work. The live didn't come on, and it was like, what's going on? Why isn't this working? And it was raining, and I thought, oh, it's just the rain. And it after it, it was like I just as you all know, I wasn't here. I had to cancel the whole thing. And and as it turned out, I made a huge mistake. I tried to get on to YouTube Live with Safari, and it doesn't work with Safari. It has to be Chrome if you're going to do it the way that I do it. And so in that moment, when I realized it was my mistake, and so I make these leaps of faith. I'm going to do these lives. They're going to be great. They're going to be whatever. Here I made a major mistake in this leap of faith and didn't put on Chrome. And so it just, rather than then going into humiliation, which would have been my past response, I actually just kind of went, oh my God, I'm just a human being. It was a humbling moment. And I was able to be with it in a different way than before when I would take it so much more personally as a failure, a pathetic loser. Now I was just like, okay, I have no idea what's going to happen. And that's the element of the leap of faith that we have struggled with. Is like, okay, I'm going to take this leap. I don't know what's going to happen. And we're willing to be with the outcome as it comes, not as a controlled thing. We're trying to always control the outcome. When I was in my 40s, I decided to cross the Atlantic Ocean in a 93-foot sailboat with 5 other people. That was a leap of faith because I was sure I was going to die. And at the same time, most people don't die when they're crossing the Atlantic Ocean. So the likelihood of me not dying was good. But at the same time, there was potential for death. And I think this is an element that keeps so many of us from making leaps of faith, even the leap of faith of changing one particular way of being during the day, changing one food in the morning, or changing one way of putting your socks away, is when that there's a life and death element to almost every single leap of faith that we feel. And like I was saying, as we do more and more of this, we become more courageous and more strengthened and more resilient, so that when those we're asked to make these greater leaps of faith, we're ready, and we do it. Not like Superman or Spider-Man, but when we're moved to do it, we're ready. And I think that's a really, really good thing, because every single one of us is asked, even obviously through this pandemic and all of the storms, the winter storms that are affecting the United States specifically. We are asked to be in faith and take leaps of faith and be present to how challenging it is. And part of that, again, I'm just saying so much in so many ways. Part of the leaps of faith could be expressing to ourselves how scared we are, how frightened we are, how sad we are, how demoralizing, how uncertain it is right now. The leap of faith can be telling the truth to ourselves about how it really feels to be ourselves. So these leaps of faith aren't always about, building and manifesting this and that, other than building and manifesting this deeper, deeper relationship with ourselves and the truer sense of who we are in ourselves. And as we do that, then again, we become more aligned every day with who we are and how we be every day, so that it becomes an everyday element of life. And do I struggle every day? I do, with what am I going to do, and how is this going to look, and what's going to happen, and what happens when my doggy barks on these live, all of these things. So it's not as though any of us will be beyond these dilemmas, but we can handle them in a way that is more affirming, and there's more and more evidence that supports us. I got through this the last time. I got through this the time before that. I've shifted this, and I've got this support. I have people, and I've got teachers, I've got all my unseen support. So I'm going to do the best I can, and I don't know the outcome. And that can be very humbling, and it is very humbling. So, any last words from my audience tonight? Any feedback or questions before we go? We have about 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes. So, wondering if there's any questions that you guys have or comments. What's the big takeaway for you guys tonight? As you're writing, I will see if there's something else I wanted to say. So here's a few things I've written down, and maybe they are great last words for the evening. It takes faith to be present to the person or the situation in front of you as if they were worthy of your presence. So, quite often, thanks, Margaret. Yes, I was thinking that leaps of faith. I'm thinking about that for sure. Um, Quite often, we are distracted with how it should be or how we should be, or we've been rehearsing how we're going to be, as opposed to just letting ourselves be here now in this moment with this person or this book or my knitting or your skiing. It's like, how do you be here now in this present moment? That takes faith, and it's a beautiful practice. It takes faith to say yes, and it takes faith to say no. It takes faith to love yourself no matter what. That's that's a big one. Um, and I'm saying that not as if you're not lovable, but the experience of for me to learn to love myself no matter what, huge, huge experience, huge practice. And the leaps of faith to say, what have I got to lose by loving myself? What have I got to lose? What do you got to lose by loving yourself? Isn't that a great question? Margaret, I'll put that in the book. So, um, it takes faith to see your beauty and to allow it to shine, no matter what. There are people who think they're too fat or too old or too skinny or too whatever, as opposed to saying, what's the beauty? Can I see the beauty here? As opposed to constantly questioning and going, yes, but if only my hair was, and if only this was, and if only all those if onlys. And can we love ourselves without those if onlys? It's like, I just love myself. I'm beautiful. It's awesome. It's awesome being this beautiful. And it's scary to say that, right? It's very humbling. It's scary. Um, it takes faith to stop adding descriptors to yourself. Like I said, if only I wasn't so old, or if only I wasn't this, or if only I wasn't that. And I keep watching the time because I know in any second now you're going to disappear. Make sure if you haven't already, please like and just subscribe. And if you hit the notification button, you will be notified when the next videos arrive. So let that be that. And I think what I'll do is, let's see if there's anything here. It takes faith to live in the unknown of who you are. That is just one of the biggest. Okay, Margaret, I'm definitely writing the book. It takes faith. It takes faith to live in the unknown and the unknown of who you are, because we never, ever, ever know. We can pretend we know. We can avoid the whole conversation, but the beauty of this practice, I believe, is to learn to live in the unknown of who you are, and be grateful about it, and just love the experience of that. All right, you guys, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.